I want to talk about resilience. Resilience is a very common concept within youth health, and what we talk about, what we mean by resilience, is something which is an innate, a personality thing that means that some people cope and some people aren't so good at coping. Tim and I have a theory that the world can be divided into two sorts of people: those that cope with a whole range of difficult circumstances and those that don't tend to cope. And there's all sorts of theories around that. But if we think about resilience, we think about something within. But what it takes to bring that out so that people are actually able to be resilient and to cope well in society is someone else on the outside. And I want to really emphasise the importance of someone within a church setting, whether it's through a youth group or a Sunday school teacher or a befriender, the parent of a friend of a young person, for example, someone who gives a young person, gives a family member who does not have anybody else to turn to, the opportunity to have ideas discussed, practical support given, to be there for them. When I worked in South Auckland, I was working with a young woman for quite some time, and she was estranged from her mum, and she was in a boarding situation that really wasn't terribly great. And we were working about ways of encouraging her to move forward, to take, to look at life from a different perspective. And she came to a session one day, and she had an envelope with her, and so out of the envelope she took some application forms. And it turned out that she was going to be applying for a course at the local tech. And she said, would it be okay if I helped her fill in the forms? And I said, yes, certainly. And then she went on to say that she had actually nobody in the whole world that she could go to get her get some support filling in forms. And you know what filling in forms is like. Even when you're pretty bright, you're stable, you're in a good mood, it's an easy form, there still is that, oh, where do I tick, what do I do, and so on. And this young woman had actually nobody, so she came to me, her counsellor, and we spent some of the time in that session filling in the form. And it just emphasised some research that had come out of the Big Youth 2000 survey of almost 10,000 young people throughout New Zealand high schools that was, took place in 2001. And one of the things that they find in this research is that if young people have an adult, whether a member of a family or a member, someone who wasn't in the family, someone who was at school, someone within a church setting, who was there for them, that those young people were physically more healthy, emotionally more healthy, and socially better adjusted. So just because it's a friendship where you may not have a huge amount in common with a young person or with the family, do not put down the real importance of being there and being Christ-like for a person who does not have other people that they can turn to. Just being there, a friendly word, encouragement, not necessarily condoning some of the situations that you may hear about, but being there, being accepting of this person, and being there for practical things, and being there as a way of telling them, showing them of a new way that they can live. We look at what the importance of the families are regarding domestic violence, and hearing Eugene speak earlier about how gangs, the vast majority were not condoning of violence and were hoping and finding ways of helping people to come out of abusive situations. And very often there may be people who are loosely attached to the church where you are. They may come to one of the programs that is run, and you know what is going on. And so it is a case of not condoning, but of listening, of accepting and walking alongside. One of the things that I was most saddened when I was working years ago in South Auckland was a Christian woman, mum of 3 kids, who came to see me. Her marriage had broken down because of her husband's unfaithfulness and her violence towards her. He was also a Christian, and they both attended the same church. And what really saddened me was that she and the children had been asked by one of the elders to leave the church, to not come there to worship. It was too awkward, it was too embarrassing, the church did not know what to do with this family, and it was incredibly hurtful. Fortunately, she was able to find another local church where she and her children were accepted, and while she had some great arguments with God, she was able to stay firm in her faith, and her children were accepted, and the family were able to grow and move on. But it really saddened me, the condoning of violence, the almost institutional acceptance that it was, despite what the husband had done, it was the wife and children who were asked to leave. And I would be really sorry to hear if something like that was happening at the moment. One of the things that struck us when we came to New Zealand and our children were going through primary school was actually the number of our kids' friends who came from families where it wasn't mum, dad and the kids, where it was some other combination. I think sometimes we can think that it's people in particularly low socioeconomic areas where there are a lot of dysfunctional families and all the labels that we think of, where it's not just mum and dad and the kids, where it's the solo mums, and where dads aren't around, where kids don't have any contact with dads. And I would like to say that separation, divorce goes through all strata of society. We are looking at a whole range of people coming to within contact of the gospel who are not mum, dad and the kids. And I really want to make a plea for taking people as they are, accepting people and being aware of the huge number of difficult situations that people have come from. The church's role, outreach and pastoral care. The two things, I need to be finishing. The two things are really important. The coming alongside, the befriending, particularly with young people, particularly with families where there is something that's not the best going on. So it's important to think about the role that you have to play. One of the things in one of my family's papers at BTI that I talk about is the huge importance of the family of origin, the family that you grow up in. And for some people that is not a great role model. But with the help of other people who come from different backgrounds who are able to talk about what it is that we believe and we value within families, it can be a real life-changing situation for people to hear things that they actually haven't heard before. When you work with families who come from difficult situations and you hear what is normal for them. Someone I was teaching a few years ago talked about how she had never ever gone to a friend's house, gone anywhere but her own home for a meal until she was in her teens. And then she was invited to a friend's house. And when she was having dinner at her friend's house, she discovered one really important thing, one life-changing thing, that the friend's family did not argue, that they were happy, they were respectful, they had meals that they enjoyed. And for her, she said her life changed because she could see a different model.
Good job, though, she didn't come to our family because we argue all the time. It's just that we argue and respect each other, both parents and when the children were home children. What we haven't talked about is gospel. Where's the gospel in all this? Where's the good news from God in all this? But think about it. If God was employed as an HR consultant, God would get the sack. Think of the people that God chooses to be leaders. I'm going to start a new family, says God. Genesis chapter 11 and 12. Things have got such a mess, I'm going to start again with a chosen family. I'll choose Abraham. And you know what happens. The family falls apart and has to be put together, and Hagar gets kicked out, and you know it's the story. But think about it from the other perspective. What's going on there? What's going on there is God at work in the family of Abraham and Sarah and Hagar, building on what is, not on what should be. Or think of Jacob and his horribly untidy family. Again, God at work in a family as it is, not as it should be. All through the Bible stories, we see and hear God at work in the messy reality of human life. And that's what we should be expecting in our churches. To be catching glimpses of God at work in the messy reality of human life. Because if God can work through Jacob's family, Jacob Israel, God can work through your family, my family, and that difficult family who come sometimes on Sundays. The Bible doesn't give us a model to which we must conform, or if we fail to conform, then we are failures and will be kicked out. The Bible gives us a goal to aim for, a virtue to practice, the virtue of being faithful and loving and kind to each other where we are. And the Bible gives us examples. And they're examples which are not traditional families. Jesus and Ruth are the prime examples of this virtue. They're the sorts of people, and there are others in the scripture too, but they're the two that stick out in my mind as the primary examples. They're the sorts of people that we should be aiming to be. And that is gospel. Because it's just the same as the gospel. The gospel is not about us working hard so that God will deserve us, God will owe us something. It's about a free gift from God. And that too is what gospel and family is about. It's about free gifts from God. The gifts of grace in situations that are less than optimal. And that's what we've got to say to you about gospel and family.